Picture this. You're sitting in a lecture. Third row, Tuesday afternoon. The professor is talking about something you should probably be paying attention to, but you're not there. Not literally. You're in the seat. Your eyes are open. Your body is present, but you are somewhere else entirely. Watching the lecture from a distance. Watching yourself sit there. Watching the professor move their mouth. Watching your own hands on the desk like they belong to someone you've never met. The fluorescent lights look wrong. Too flat. Too artificial. Like a stage set that someone forgot to finish building. The sounds are coming from very far away. Your name could be called, and you're not sure you'd respond. Not because you're ignoring it, because you're not entirely sure you have a name right now. You look down at your hands again. They don't feel like your hands. Nothing feels like anything. Oh, hey there. Welcome back. I'm your host. Dead, obviously. Fully dissociated from my physical form at this point, which, if we're being technical, makes me uniquely qualified to discuss today's topic. Today we're talking about dissociation, the experience of becoming disconnected from yourself, your surroundings, your memories, your identity, or some combination of all four, simultaneously. Without warning, without apparent reason, most people have experienced a mild version of this. You drove home and don't remember the last 10 minutes of the trip. You zoned out in a conversation and lost the thread entirely. You looked in a mirror and felt briefly, unsettlingly, like you were looking at a stranger. That's the shallow end. Let's find out what it actually feels like when you go fully into the deep end. Let's find out what it feels like when you dissociate. So, what exactly is dissociation, and why does your brain do this to you? Here's the simple version. Your brain has a very specific job. It takes everything coming in, sensory information, memories, emotional signals, proprioceptive feedback from your body, and integrates all of it into a single unified experience. The experience of being you, right now, in this body, in this moment. This integration isn't automatic. It requires active coordination between multiple brain regions. Your default mode network, which maintains your sense of self and autobiographical continuity. Your thalamus, which acts as the brain's central relay station, filtering and routing sensory information. Your prefrontal cortex, which provides top-down regulation of emotion and perception. Your anterior cingulate cortex, which monitors the relationship between your thoughts and your body. When these systems work together correctly, you feel like a unified person moving through a coherent reality. When they don't, you get dissociation. The brain essentially interrupts the integration process, deliberately. Dissociation is not a malfunction. It is a protective mechanism. It evolved specifically for situations of overwhelming stress or trauma. When the full experience of what is happening is too much to process, your brain creates distance from it. It separates the observer from the experience. It buffers you from your own reality. The neuroscience is increasingly clear on this. During dissociative states, activity in the prefrontal cortex actually increases while activity in the limbic system, particularly the amygdala, your emotional alarm center, decreases significantly. Your brain is essentially using its rational analytical regions to suppress the emotional and threat response regions, creating a kind of internal firewall between what is happening and how much of it you actually have to feel. It's a remarkable piece of engineering, and it is profoundly disorienting to experience from the inside. Dissociation exists on a spectrum. At one end, the mild and extremely common end, you have absorption, daydreaming, zoning out, Highway hypnosis, being so engrossed in a book or film that you lose track of time and surroundings. Approximately 98% of the population experiences this level of dissociation regularly. It is completely normal. It requires no concern. Moving along the spectrum, you encounter depersonalization, the feeling of being detached from your own body or mental processes, watching yourself from outside, feeling like your thoughts are not quite your own, feeling like a robot going through motions, and derealization, where the external world rather than the self becomes unreal. Objects look flat or artificial. Colors seem wrong. Familiar places feel foreign. Other people seem like they are behind glass. Reality acquires the quality of a dream you're not quite convinced you're having. Further along the spectrum, dissociation can involve amnesia, gaps in memory, periods of time that simply aren't there when you look for them, entire identities that operate separately from each other. Today we're focusing on the middle of the spectrum, the depersonalization and derealization territory, where things get genuinely strange. Let's go stage by stage, because dissociation isn't one thing that happens all at once. It unfolds. Stage 1. The trigger. Dissociation is usually triggered by something, though sometimes the trigger is so subtle you miss it entirely, or the trigger is the absence of anything. Sometimes dissociation just happens. Common triggers include acute stress, trauma, sleep deprivation, certain medications, panic attacks, and in some people, particular sensory experiences, bright lights, crowded spaces, specific sounds or smells that the brain has associated, sometimes without your conscious awareness, with something overwhelming. In your case, sitting in the lecture, something happened. Maybe you haven't slept properly in 4 days. Maybe you've been running on anxiety and caffeine for weeks. Maybe something in the room triggered an association you didn't know your brain had stored. Maybe nothing at all triggered it, and your nervous system simply decided it needed a moment. The trigger fires. Your prefrontal cortex begins suppressing the limbic response. The integration process starts to come apart. Stage 2. The shift. Something changes in the quality of your experience. Most people describe noticing it first in their perception of their own body. A subtle wrongness, like the signal between your brain and your physical self, has developed a slight delay, not painful, not frightening immediately, just off. Your hands look slightly foreign. Your voice, if you speak, sounds like it's coming from somewhere slightly beside where you're standing. Your body continues doing what it was doing. Breathing, sitting, looking forward. But the sense of authorship over these actions has gone slightly fuzzy. This is the depersonalization component beginning. Simultaneously, the room shifts, not dramatically. The fluorescent lights were always that color, but now they're that color in a way that seems significant and wrong. The sounds of the room, the professor's voice, the occasional rustling of papers, arrive with a quality of distance that didn't exist 30 seconds ago. This is the derealization beginning. Stage 3. The deepening. If the dissociation continues rather than resolving, the experience intensifies. The sense of observing yourself from outside becomes more pronounced. Not a full out-of-body experience necessarily, though some dissociation does involve that, more like a slight spatial offset between where you seem to be and where your body is. Emotionally, something remarkable happens. The emotional valence of the situation begins to flatten. Things that should feel concerning feel neutral. Things that should feel interesting feel equally neutral. The emotional color of experience drains. This is the amygdala suppression at work. Your brain is cutting the emotional signal while maintaining basic cognitive function. You can still think, you can still answer questions if asked, you can still follow a conversation at a surface level, but the thinking feels like it's happening at a remove, like reading someone else's thoughts rather than generating your own. Your sense of time becomes unreliable. Minutes may feel like hours, or hours like minutes. The normal rhythm of subjective time, where seconds feel like seconds, becomes distorted. Stage 4. Full derealization. In severe or extended dissociative episodes, the external world can take on an almost hallucinatory quality. Objects appear two-dimensional. The visual field loses depth. People move in ways that seem slightly robotic, slightly uncanny. The colors of the world are present, but feel like a photograph of a world rather than the world itself. Some people at this stage describe it as living inside a movie or a video game with slightly wrong physics. The set dressing is all correct, but the realness is missing. Here's what's neurologically happening. Your thalamus, the central relay station, has altered its filtering. The sensory information coming in is the same, but the contextual processing that makes sensory experience feel real, that adds the texture of genuine reality to the raw data of perception, has been modulated. Your brain knows intellectually that the world is real. It just can't fully generate the feeling that it is. This is also why dissociation can be so alarming when people first experience it. The fear isn't usually that something is physically wrong. It's the meta-level fear. The brain asking itself why nothing feels real and being unable to answer satisfactorily. That recursive loop of trying to think your way out of the feeling and having the thinking itself feel unreal is one of the most consistently reported and most unsettling aspects of the experience. So what does this actually feel like from the inside? Because we've covered the neuroscience, let's talk about the experience itself. The single most consistent descriptor across dissociation accounts is the word cotton. Cotton wool, like being wrapped in it, separated from everything by a layer of it. The world and the self both exist, but separated by this invisible insulating material. People describe watching their own hands complete tasks and feeling nothing about it. Not numbness exactly, more like watching someone else's hands from a reasonable distance. The intellectual knowledge that these are your hands, the complete absence of the felt sense that they are. The emotional flatness is described by some as peaceful, particularly in people whose baseline is anxiety. The alarm is off. The constant running commentary of worry and self-monitoring has gone quiet. There's a strange restfulness in that, even as another part of the mind flags that something is wrong. Others find it profoundly distressing, particularly those experiencing derealization strongly. The sense that nothing is real can generate its own panic, which can then deepen the dissociation, which creates more panic. This cycle is well documented and is one of the mechanisms through which an acute dissociative episode can become a longer-lasting problem. Survivors of severe trauma who experience chronic dissociation often describe it not as a dramatic departure from reality, but as a default state they have to consciously work to exit. The dissociated state becomes the baseline. Connection to the self and to reality becomes the effortful condition rather than the automatic one. Here's where the numbers get serious. Depersonalization, derealization disorder. The clinical condition characterized by persistent or recurrent episodes of the dissociation we've been describing affects an estimated 1 to 2% of the general population as a primary diagnosis. That's between 3 and 6 million people in the United States alone. but transient depersonalization and derealization, episodes that occur without meeting the clinical threshold for a disorder diagnosis, are far more common. Studies suggest that approximately 26 to 74% of people will experience at least one significant dissociative episode in their lifetime. The range is wide because definition and measurement vary, but even the conservative end of that range means roughly 1 in 4 people will experience this at some point. Dissociative disorders as a category, including dissociative amnesia and dissociative identity disorder, affect approximately 10% of the general population in some form, making them collectively as common as anxiety disorders. Despite this, they remain among the least understood and most stigmatized conditions in mental health. The connection to trauma is strong. Research consistently shows that childhood trauma, particularly repeated interpersonal trauma, significantly increases the likelihood of developing chronic dissociative symptoms. The brain that learned early to protect itself by disconnecting continues using that same mechanism into adulthood, long after the original threat has passed. And here's something important. Dissociation in the context of panic disorder is extremely common and extremely treatable. If you're experiencing episodes of depersonalization or derealization alongside panic attacks, this is well-mapped clinical territory. Effective treatments exist. It is not permanent. It is not a sign of serious mental illness. It is a nervous system doing something it learned to do that can be unlearned. So there you have it. Dissociation. Your brain creating deliberate distance between you and your experience as an act of protection, sometimes helpful, sometimes disorienting, always deeply strange from the inside. Here's the thing worth knowing. If you've experienced this, you are not going crazy. You are not losing your mind. You are experiencing a very specific, very well documented, neurologically understood protective response, one that approximately 1/4 of the human population will experience at some point in some form. The goal is not to fight it in the moment. The goal is to gently return. Grounding techniques, sensory anchoring, slow breathing. These work not because they're tricks, but because they give your thalamus something concrete and present to route through its relay system. They restore the integration that dissociation interrupted. If it's happening persistently, chronically, interfering with your life, that's a clinical matter and help is available. Talk to someone who actually knows what dissociation is. Not all mental health professionals have deep familiarity with it. Find one who does. Hit subscribe if you want more videos about the most unusual and least understood things your brain is capable of doing without consulting you first. I've got plenty of material. I'm dead. I have nothing but time and an extensive first-hand understanding of the space between presence and absence. And hey, next time you're driving and suddenly realize you have no memory of the last 5 minutes, you didn't black out. Your brain just took a small, unauthorized vacation. Trust me on that one.